We begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Ches Samar Aleph, right at the beginning of the Amud, where it says Ashkechad. So the Gemara is discussing what we learned in the Mishnah, the different relatives, Kroivim, that are possible for Eidos, possible to be judges. The Mishnah brought different examples, different cases, and the source, in the psukim for the psul of relatives, it brought from the pasuk where it says La Yumsu Avis al Banim, and the Banim La Yumsu al Avis. And the Gemara darshan that this means that you can't use the Eidos of the father to passel the son, you can't use the Eidos of the son to passel the father. So the Gemara now says on this, Ashkechan Avis Labanim Labanim Lavis. So I have the source to say that there's a psul from the father to the sons and from the sons to the father. So that's a clear source in the pasuk. Now Rashi adds to that this includes also an uncle and a nephew, because it says here Avis Loshen Rabim. That means that there are two fathers. There's your father and then his brother, Avos. And the Avos are both going to be possible to the nephew, and the nephew is going to be possible also to the father and his uncle. So therefore we see the psul father and son and uncle and nephew. Now V'kolshkin Avis La'adadi. Definitely the fathers are going to be possible to one another as Kroivim if a father and his brother are possible to the Kroivim to the nephew. So definitely the nephew is just a son of the brother. So for sure the brothers themselves are going to be Kroivim that are apostle. So we have a source for the brothers as well. Now the question though is, Banim labanim minalan. From where do we know that Kroivim includes also first cousins? The father and the son of one father, the son of another father, the first cousins, how do we know that they're going to be Kroivim as well? As it said in the Mishnah that the Kroivim that it speaks about includes also their sons. And says the Gemara, the source is because if we're just learning out the fathers and the uncle and the nephew, lichtav krala yumsu avos, so it already says plural, which includes your father and his brother. Al ben, you could just say singular term, the son, and that would mean that even the uncle is a karav to the nephew, and the nephew is a karav to the father. My banim. Why does he use a plural term? That's coming to say, Banim Lashon Rabim means that if both of these brothers have sons, that the first cousins are going to be Kroivim to one another. Someone asks further, Ashkechan, so he see here in the pasuk Banim La'adadi, that the Banim, the first cousins to one another, cannot say Eidos for the benefit of one another. They're Kroivim and they're apostle for that. Banim La'alma Minalan. From where do I know that these Banim, if they are together, Eidim, in one Eidos, and they want to testify together for someone else, how do we know that because in the same Eidos you have these two brothers, or it's really, two first cousins, how do you know that these Banim are going to be possible to say Eidos to anyone else? Okay, so it's not only been negayed to these first cousins, but b'chlal. The question the Gemara is asking is, when you have two Eidim, and these two Eidim are Kroivim to each other, how do I know that besides the fact that you can't say Eidos for a Karev, but in the same Eidos, two that are Kroivim cannot say Eidos to anyone else? So Rami Bacham answers, Svaruhu. That's actually something that we could learn logically without a source of a pasuk. Kedetanya, and it's based on what it says in the Braisa. Ein Eidim nasim zaymimin achi zu mishneim. The halacha of Eidim Zaymimin, as we learned already before, when you have a second group of Eidim that passels the first group, Manu Yisim b'Makam Plaini, they become Eidim Zaymimin. So the halacha of Eidim Zaymimin is that these Eidim are now passel, their Eidus is passel, but there's also a punishment of Kashazama. Whatever they intended to do to the person that they testified about is done to them. So the Braisa says that punishment of Kashazama does not apply Achi Zu Mishneim, unless both of the witnesses become Zaymimin. Because only then are you proving that the whole entire thing that they tried to do, based on both Eidim together, for example, they wanted to give Miso and Mammon, which you had to have both Eidim, so when you maz them both, then you can give the punishment of Kashazamam. Says the Gemara, now it comes out that the Kashazamam is based on the fact that they're saying together. If you're going to say that when you have relatives, if they're saying Eidos together for someone else, that will be kosher. They just can't say Eidos for one another. Nimtza, if so, it would come out Eid Zaymim Nerag ve'Eidos Achiv. That these two Eidim, one Eid is getting the punishment of Kashazama, which could be Misa, based on the fact that he said Eidos together with a relative of his, and only because his relative said Eidos together with him, and both of them were found to be false, that's why he's getting the punishment of Kashazama. So it comes out that if you're allowing two Eidim relatives to say Eidos, that one is his punishment of Kashazama that he's getting is only because his relative joined him in the Eidos. So your punishment is coming from your relative. So if so, that is, we understand already based on what we said before, that Kroivim cannot testify for one another, and over here in this case, the other aid, which is your relative, cannot be the cause for you getting the punishment of kashizama. So therefore, this is logically understood that there's no din of the Krevim cannot say edus together. Amalei Rave, but Rave refutes this source, this svara. He says, according to your reasoning, hadetnan, this that it says in the Mishnah, shloisha achin ve'echad, you can have 3 brothers and then one more individual that's not a brother. Mitztaref iman, he can combine together with them. And what this is talking about is regarding a person that wants to bring proof of ownership of his property. And one of the ways to bring proof is that he's there for 3 years. So now he doesn't have eidos that are not brothers to prove this. So he has 3 brothers, one brother for the first year, another brother for the second year, another brother for the third year, that can testify for the 3 years. But those brothers cannot testify together. Each one knows for another year. And then you have another individual from the street that's not a relative, that's not a brother. He can testify about all 3 years. So what that Mishnah is saying is that these 3 brothers cannot combine with that person that's not a brother. He'll combine with the first brother for the first year, with the second for the second year, with the third for the third year. And it's it's considered to be 3 separate testimonies for each year individually. And therefore, it's not an issue of using brothers together in one edus. But on the other hand, v'hein edus achas lahazameh. But if you want to then be mazim, in order to be mekayim, the einish of kashazamam, just by having the edus of 1 year, you didn't prove ownership. The only way you prove ownership is by having the edus, all of them together for all 3 years. So if you want to give the einish of kashazamam, you're going to have to be mazim all of the 3 edus together. Then you can say that the 3 years together, they wanted to establish this person as an owner, which was a lie. Now we'll take away that value of money from them. The einish of kashazamam will apply. So it goes all together. So if so Rava asks, according to what it says in this Mishnah, Nimtza comes out that Eid Zaymim Mishalem Mamim Ve'eid Sachiv. In this case, the Kashazamam would be that each one of these brothers that are now getting punished with the punishment of Kashazamam, that they wanted to take away a property and give it to someone that it doesn't belong to them, and now they have to lose that money as well. How is this Kashazamam being applied? Through the fact that your brother testified about the other year. You needed the brother to testify about the next year and then the other brother about the next year to combine together in order to have the einish of kashazama. So here you see, according to the svara, that Rami Bacham said that if it's a brother that's causing the einish of kashazama, so then you can't have a relative causing the einish of kashazama. But in this case, that's what's happening. So Elo, what's the answer? It's not a problem. Hazame ma'al makasi. In such a kind of case, when you have the 3 separate edim for the 3 different years, and then in the end, by the einish of kashazamam, it comes out that only because your brother testified about another year, therefore you're getting the einish of kashazamam. You can't say that it's your brother that's saying testimony that's causing you to get the einish of kashazamam. It's not the brother that's causing it. It's the kashazamam, it's the hazama, it's the other edim that are proving that what you said is false. That's causing you to get the punishment. You said edus about that year, other edim now came and proved that what you said is false. They are the cause of your kashazamam. It's not your brother. True, you have to have the brother with you for the second year, for the third year, in order for the einish to apply. But could you attribute the einish of kashazamam that you're getting to the brother? No, me'al makasi. That's coming from the second group of edim that's saying that you lied. That's the cause of your punishment. So Achanami here as well in the svara that Rami Bacham said, when you have 2 edim and that are relatives that are saying edus together, you can't say that in such a case they can't say edus together because then the relative is the cause for your punishment of kashazamam. No, it's not the eid. The other eid is not the cause of that. Hazame me'al makasi. Your cause of the fact that you're getting the punishment is coming from the second group of edim that proves that you lied. The relative that's saying edus together with you is not the one that's proving that you lied. So he's not the source of your kashazamam. So if so, the question goes back, from where do we know that relatives cannot say edus together against someone else? Elo, therefore the Gemara says we have a pasuk with this. We do need a pasuk, and then we go back to the pasukim that we brought before. Because now, imkei in lichteiv kra, after the pasuk says, la yumsu avis al banim, the pasuk goes on to say, ubanim la yumsu al avis. It doesn't have to say this plural term of ubanim again. It could have just said here the singular term, uben al avis. Inami, or furthermore, it doesn't even have to mention ben again, because it already said before, we're talking about the banim. It could have said haim, they, the ones that we spoke about before, haim alavis, my u banim. Why does it spell out again u banim and in a plural term? What it's saying is, afila banim, that when you have banim, when you have brothers, or you have any relatives, if they are together edim, la'alma, to testify against someone else, they can't. That's the source. So the Gemara goes on, Ashkechan, so we have the source for Krevi Av. In this pasuk, it speaks about the father and the son, so we have the source for relatives that are relatives because they share the same father, or through the father, they're relatives. That's a psol for Krevim. Krevi Eminalon, how do I know that it applies also to Krevim that is through the mother? On Makra, the pasuk here, it says the double lashon avos trezimni. It uses the term avos twice, which is also extra, and therefore I'll say imen inyan el krevi av when it has a repetition, and it's not necessary to say for the relatives through the father. Tanei inyan krevi ein. We add and say that even relatives that's through the mother are also relatives and will be possible. Another thing going on, ashkechon l'chayva. We see from here that in the pasuk it says la yumsu, that you can't say edus for a relative or against a relative if you're going to be causing him something that's in the negative, that you're going to give him misa. Luschus min alan. How do I know that you can't say edus for your relative for his benefit, for his gain? So don't forget that the psul of Krevim has nothing to do with being in a gay bedavar chash that you're lying. It's just exeris akasav that you can't say edus because you're a relative. So maybe that's only if you're saying it for l'chayva, as the pasuk says la'yumsu. How do you know it's for a benefit as well? On Makra, so the pasuk answers. The Gemara answers. The pasuk says yumsu terei zimni. It says in the Torah twice the term of yumsu la'yumsu aves. It says starts off la'yumsu, then it says again la'yumsu aves. So that's an extra word. Trei zimni im eni l'chayva. So the second time it says that if it's not for the negative, for misa, t'nei l'schos, it's coming to add that even if it's for the gain of your relative, you're not allowed to say edus either as a relative. Now ashkecham b'din nefashis. In this pasuk we see the source for the psul of krevim when it comes to a matter of misa, life, death. B'din mamanis minolan. How do I know that this applies also when you're saying edus for your relative just in a money manner? So there's another pasuk, Makra, the pasuk says, Mishpat echad yeh lachem. There's one din, one mishpat, the justice is the same by everything, which is Mishpat hashava lachem. Or Mishpat hashava, the other gear say here is Mishpat hashava lakulam. Or, no, Mishpat shave lachem, that is. Okay, that is one mishpat that's shave for everything. Meaning both for money matters and for din and nefashis, it's the same halacha of the psul of krevim. Now the Gemara is going to discuss different details of relatives that are possible. Omar Ravache said, let me read that again. Omar Rav said, Achi Abba, my uncle, my father's brother, Lo yoed li, he can't testify for me, I'm his nephew. Hu ubenoi v'chasanoi, not he can testify for me, not his son, not his son-in-law. Like it says in the Mishnah, that the one that apostle to you includes also the son and the son-in-law as well. And then, afani loy oed loy, I can't testify for my uncle, and that includes ani, I can't testify for my uncle, ubini, and that includes my son as well, v'chasani, and my son-in-law cannot testify for my uncle as well. Okay, now this case that he's saying here, it does not say clearly in the Mishnah, because what he's saying basically is that not only he as a nephew can't testify for his uncle, but even his son cannot testify for his uncle, which is a great uncle. In other words, a great nephew cannot testify for a great uncle. So the Gemara asks on this, Va'amai, why is Rav saying this? Havale shlishi berishain, what we call great nephew in the lashon of the Gemara is called a shlishi berishain. Why is it called shlishi berishain? Because the uncle with his brother, that's rishain, that's the closest relative, a brother. Then the nephew, that's the next generation. He's a sheni. He's the next generation. A nephew to uncle is a sheni berishain to the uncle. Then the nephew's son, the great nephew to his great uncle is a shlishi. It's the third generation. That's pasul. That's a karev to the first generation to the great uncle. That's a shlishi berishain. And it does not say this case clearly in the Mishnah. Va'anan, in the Mishnah it says sheni b'sheni tnan. It talks about sheni b'sheni. Sheni b'sheni is what we call first cousins. You have the brothers and then their sons, that they're puzzled, they're craving to one another. That it says clearly in the Mishnah. And also Sheni B'Rishain Tanan. The Mishnah it says Sheni B'Rishain, a nephew to an uncle. But Shlishi B'Rishain Lo Tanan. The case of Shlishi B'Rishain does not say in our Mishnah. So where's the source of Rav? So the Gemara answers, there's actually a different way how to read our Mishnah. My chasane diktani b'masnisen. When it says in the Mishnah chasane, what does the Mishnah mean to say? Chasan benoy. What it's saying is the chasan of his son. That's who the Mishnah is talking about. when it says in the Mishnah that your uncle is going to be pasul. What did it say in the Mishnah? That the uncle is pasul, then it said Benai, his son's going to be pasul to you, and also v'chasanai. So the simple way to read the Mishnah is your uncle's son and your uncle's son-in-law. That's who's going to be a relative to you to be pasul. But over here though, the Gemara is teaching when it says in the Mishnah Benai and chasanai, it doesn't mean chasanai, your uncle's son-in-law. It means your uncle's son's son-in-law, right? That's what it goes on. Okay, so now what that means is that that's a third generation from your uncle, and he is going to be pasul to who? He's going to be pasul, not to the Rishon actually. He's going to be pasul to what we would call a first cousin once removed, and your uncle's nephew. Okay, and now you're pasul to your uncle, and not only you're pasul to your uncle, you're pasul to his son, which is your first cousin, and then you're also pasul to your first cousin's son-in-law. Okay, so that's really a sheni b'shlishi. You're pasul not only to your first cousin, which is called a sheni b'sheni, but you're also pasul to your first cousin's son-in-law. That's what the Mishnah meant to say. And then in the Lashon of the Gemara, that's what's called sheni b'shlishi. So that's the source for what Rav says, that even a great nephew, which is the third generation to his uncle, will be pasul. That's a shlishi b'rishim, will also be pasul. Now the Gemara is soon going to address the question that it comes out based on this pshat, that the Mishnah is actually saying a further psul even than what Rav himself said. Rav said that a great nephew is a relative to a great uncle. Based on the pshat that we're saying in the Mishnah now, you're saying that you're going to be pasul to a first cousin once removed, which is what's called in the Lashon of the Gemara, sheni b'shlishi. You're a second generation from your uncle, and now your uncle's grandson, a son-in-law of his son, will be pasul to you. So it's a little bit further than what Rav said. Okay, the Gemara will address that soon. But first the Gemara...
A cousin once removed.
Again?
Give an example again of a cousin once removed.
Your first cousin son-in-law. Your first cousin son-in-law. So that's the next generation. I think that's what we call the first cousin once removed. No, because it's the next generation.
The son-in-law is not even part of the family.
He's son-in-law. That doesn't matter. We'll see soon in the Gemara. Once he marries in, he's part of the family. Okay, let's see. Of course, the son-in-law is part of the family. Okay, let's see. Fragt the Gemara, Velisni. If so. If so, let the Mishnah say, if the point there is to say that the next generation, that your uncle's sons, and then his son-in-law as well as possible, why does it talk to about a son-in-law? Let the Mishnah say, Ben Benai, that the son of the son is also going to be a relative, the next generation. Why Dafka the son-in-law? Says the Gemara, Milsa Agav Orche Kamashmalan. It's teaching me a point here, that Agav Orche, on the way, it's telling me another point. This answers your question. The Baal Kishtai. That a husband is like the wife. Regarding this halacha of the psul of korva, of relative, the husband and the wife is the same thing. So therefore, if it's your uncle's daughter's husband, again, if your uncle's son's daughter's husband, that's a son-in-law. So then that son-in-law is like the daughter. And the daughter is your first cousin once removed. So the son-in-law is kishtay. It's the same. It's one thing, and therefore there'll be the din of karav will apply as well. Okay, so now the Gemara has another question though based on this. We basically were mechadish now that the psul goes another generation. The psul of your uncle being your relative is not only your uncle and his son, which is the first cousin, but it also goes to the next generation, your first cousin's children. It's also going to be possible to you. So now this is a problem with what it says in the Braise. What does Rab Chia say in the Braise? Shmoina Aves. If you look in our Mishnah, you'll see that there are 8 different fathers, of 8 different people that we say that are craving to you that are going to be possible. If you count what it says in the Mishnah, you'll actually see that there's 9. The Gemara will address that. You read in the Mishnah, it says there's Achiv, there's Achiyav, there's Achiyimai, Balachayse, Balachaysav, Balachaysimai, Baalimai. And it comes out that you have over here, besides Achiv, you have over here 8 different examples, and the Gemara will explain why the 9th one, which is Gisai, is not going to be counted. We have 8. And then from these 8 we say Shehem, Esrim Varba. The 8 are then divided into 24. Why are 8 divided into 24? Because all these 8 that are relatives to you, it's not only them. It includes also their sons, all of their sons, so that times that a second time by 8, and then another time all their son-in-laws. So that's another 8. So that's 24. So therefore the 8 is 24. But now the Gemara asks, but we just added another generation. We said it's not only all these that are mentioned in the Mishnah and their sons and sons-in-law, but it also the sons, the next generation, the son of the son. So if so, Hani Tlasim Vitar Tehavi. So that should be 32, because now you have to add another generation. For example, regarding the uncle, as we just said, regarding the uncle, so it's not only your uncle's children, but it's also the uncle's children's children. Right? Your first cousin's children are also going to be puzzle. So then you have to add another 8. Now Rashi says that l'chayre it should be really another 8, and that should really be 40, because you have to add not only your first cousin's children, but also son-in-laws as well. For all of the different psulim krayvim that we're talking about, you have to add another generation of sons and son-in-laws. That should really be 40. But the Gemara is including here the son-in-laws and the sons as one. But at least 32 we should add, because we just added another generation. So therefore, the Gemara refutes this pshat that it said in the Mishnah, that it refers not only to your first cousins, but also your first cousin's children. Ela lo'ilam chasane mamish. We go back to the simple pshat of the Mishnah. When it talks about your uncle, and it says then your uncle's sons and sons-in-law, it means take your uncle's son-in-law, not your uncle's son's son-in-law, but your uncle's son-in-law. Now, so, but why does it say in the Mishnah in such a way that it sounds like it's saying that it's only your son's, your uncle's son-in-law, even though it's really your uncle's son-in-law, but it's referring to your uncle's son-in-law like as if he's another generation? The answer is Kivin de Ma'al Makasi, because he's an outsider that joined the family by marriage. Kedayr Acher Dami. Okay, so therefore he is considered to be removed, like he's removed one generation. Okay, so therefore we consider him to be like the next generation, like your uncle's sons, your first cousin's children, even though he's really a son-in-law. But the Gemara though is still arguing and saying this is the source for what Rav said, that just like we see that your first cousins by marriage, your uncle's sons-in-law, are going to be craving to you, even though they're considered to be like a next generation, they're still craving to you, and that's what's called a shlishi b'sheni. You're a second generation to your uncle, and his sons-in-law are like a third generation from him, and they're puzzled to you. So therefore Rav says, similar we say that a great nephew is going to be a relative to a great uncle, and that's a shlishi b'rishin. But now here the Gemara asks, how is this a source for what Rav said? If so, this is shlishi b'sheni. This is even a bigger chiddush than what Rav said. This is a relative where it's a second generation from the uncle. You're a nephew of your uncle, and you're going to be puzzled to your uncle's son-in-law, which because the son-in-law is only through marriage, he's considered to be like a third generation to your uncle, and still your puzzle. So this is a psul of shlishi b'sheni. And Rav, shlishi b'sheni. Rav seems to be saying that if it's a case of shlishi b'sheni, it's going to be kosher. Rav only said that shlishi b'rishen, a great nephew and a great uncle, is going to be a relative. So Ella says the Gemara, Rav, the Amak Rabbi Lazar. The source of Rav is from what it says in a Braisa, what Rabbi Lazar said. Meaning, in our Mishnah, our Mishnah holds that you're only going to be puzzled if it's sheni b'rishen. Not this pshat we said in our Mishnah is not the source for what Rav said. In our Mishnah, a son-in-law is just like a son, and therefore there's no source for what Rav said. But the source is what Rabbi Lazar said in a Braisa. The Tanya Rabbi Lazar said, Kishem shachi abba lo yadli, just like my father's brother or uncle cannot testify for me. Narhu ubenoi v'chasanoi, him, his son, and his son-in-law, kach ben achi abba, the son of my uncle, in other words, a first cousin, lo yadli, cannot testify for me. And here he added clearly, hu ubenai v'chasanai, my first cousin's son and son-in-law cannot testify for me. Okay, so here Rabbi Lazar in the Braisa clearly says, like the pshat that we wanted to say in the Mishnah, that your first cousin's children are puzzle to say this for you. That's the case of shlishi b'sheni actually, and that's the source for what Rav said that a shlishi b'rishin is puzzle. So again, the Gemara clarifies and asks, but va'akati havale shlishi b'sheni. We see that Rabbi Lazar is puzzling a karev even further. Even your first cousin's children are puzzled to say this for you, and Rav achsha shlishi b'sheni. But Rav said that will still be kosher. The psul is only regarding shlishi b'rishin when it's a great nephew and a great uncle. So on this, the Gemara answers, Rav, Savalei, Kavasei. We know that the Mishnah argues on what Rabbi Lazar says. Because in the Mishnah, it does not passel your first cousin's children. Rabbi Lazar does. So there's a machlokes about this. So therefore, Rav, on one detail, Savalei Kavasei B'chada, in one detail, he holds like Rabbi Lazar that we passel a third generation as well. That's a great nephew. But that psul of the third generation will only be from a great nephew to a great uncle, not a third generation, which is your first cousin's children, to be puzzled to you, which is a second generation of your uncle. That shlishi b'sheni, that detail he holds like the Mishnah. Because we have this machlokes of the Mishnah and the Braisa, so Rav is like an in-between opinion. He says a shlishi berishain, great nephew, is going to be possible to a great uncle, but not to go so far like Rabbi Elazar says that you're going to be possible to your first cousin's children. Now, my time of the Rav, what's the source of what Rav says that a great nephew is going to be a relative to the great uncle? The Makra, because the pasuk says la yumsu avis al banim, and then it says u banim. So when it adds u banim, there's a vav here that's adding the other u banim in the pasuk. L'rabbis, this is coming to add doiracher. When it says that the children here in this pasuk refers also to nephews, as we said before. It says avos, which means also your father's brother. So banim, the first time means nephews. And then when it says ubanim, the second time, the u is coming to add that even your children as well, which is great nephews, are also going to be possible to the great uncle. That's Rav's source. But Rabbi Elazar adds and says that you're going to be possible even to your first cousin's children. What's his source? Al banim amarachmana. The Torah uses the term al banim, and what that means is psuli the avos shadi abanim. Whatever psul there is for the avos applies by the banim as well. Just like your uncle's children are going to be possible to you, those are the first cousins. The very same psul that applies by your uncle applies by your first cousins. If your uncle's children are possible to you, your first cousin's children are also possible to you. We compare them. Okay, the Gemara brings their other psulim and shows how it's in the Mishnah. We see these psulim in the Mishnah as well. Amar Rav Nachman said, Achi chamaisi, the brother of my mother-in-law, lo yodli, she cannot, he that is, cannot testify for me. Ben achi chamaisi, the son of my mother-in-law's brother, lo yodli, cannot testify for me either. Ben achais chamaisi, the son of my mother-in-law's sister, lo yodli, cannot testify for me either. And the Gemara says, V'tana tuna. What it says here, these three cases, we basically learned this in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the same exact psul, but it says it in the reverse. Here we're talking about a person being puzzled to his mother-in-law's brother, sister, and their children. But in the Mishnah it says the ben chaysi and so on. Ben achi chamaisi and ben achais chamaisi. It's in the Mishnah it says the same thing, just in the reverse. What does it say in the Mishnah? Ba'al achaisai, the husband of your sister. Or then the husband of your aunt, of your father's sister, or balachais imai, or the husband of your aunt when it's your mother's sister. Hein, they're going to be puzzled. Ubeneyan, and their sons vichasneyan, and their son-in-laws. So from this case, chasneyan, the son-in-law. So over here you see the son-in-law to his mother-in-law. You see now that he's going to be puzzled to the children of his mother-in-law, as it says over here. This is the balachais aviv, balachais imehain, ubeneyan v'chasneyan. So you see that it works in the reverse as well. That the son-in-law is puzzled to the children of his mother-in-law's sister or brother. So that's exactly what Rav Nachman said.
Brother-in-law. That's the brother-in-law.
No, it's a first cousin through marriage.
Oh.
No, it's a first cousin through marriage. Again, your mother-in-law's brother's children are your first cousins through marriage, through your wife. That's who's going to be puzzled to you. That's basically what Rav Nachman is saying. Amar Rav Ashi said, Ki avinam be'ula, when we were by Ula, Ibayolan, he asked us, Achi chamav mahu, the brother of your father-in-law, is he going to be a relative to be puzzled? Ben achi chamav, then the son of the brother of your father-in-law, mahu, is that going to be puzzled? Ben achais chamav, also, these are all first cousins through marriage. The son of the sister of your father-in-law, mahu, what's going to be the halacha? Are they going to be puzzled to you? So Amarlan, so he answered us. Also, we see basically the Mishnah says this, but it says it in the reverse. To Nisua, the Mishnah says, achiv, that your brother is puzzled. Then it says, v'achi aviv, the brother of your father, your uncle, v'achi imai, your uncle, your mother's brother, hein ubeneyan v'chasneyan. So here it says chasneyan. So over here you see the same thing also, chasneyan, that the son-in-laws are going to be puzzled to it says chi aviv and chi imai. So here you see in the reverse the exact same thing, that the children of your father-in-law's brother or sister, your first cousins basically through marriage, are going to be puzzled. Rav, a story about another case of a psul. Rav Ikla lemizban. Gvili, Rav came to a place where he wanted to buy parchments. So they asked him, can a person say testimony for the wife of his stepson? And now this stepson, it said in the Mishnah, stepson is puzzle. It's also a relative, but stepson is different than all other psulim. By all of the psulim, we say that not only is he the relative, but his son and his son-in-laws as well. By the stepson, it said only the stepson is considered to be pasul, not anyone else. So the question is, we don't include anyone else, but how about his wife? Let's say the wife has a din Torah about her properties. Rashi says it has to be nichse malug, which is his properties, where the husband, the stepson, that doesn't have the ownership in it. Could you testify for that? So Besura Amri, in Surah they said, Baal ke'ishtoi, that the husband is like the wife, meaning that since this is your wife's son, and then the wife's son's wife, Eishes Chargai, so then you're just like your wife. So if your wife is going to be pasul to her, is the mother of this child, you as a husband to your wife is just like your wife yourself, and therefore you're going to be pasul to the stepson's wife as well. The Pumpadisa Amri, in the Pumpadisa they said, Isha Kabaila. They explained this regarding the stepson, that her husband and the wife of the stepson is the same like the stepson itself. If you're pasul to your stepson, you're pasul to your stepson's wife as well, because the wife and the husband is one thing regarding the psul of relatives. Ravuna said in the name of Rav, from where do we see that husband and wife are considered to be the same thing in the psul of relatives? Because the pasuk says, do not reveal the erva of the brother of your father, and then it says, do not go to be with the wife of your uncle, and then it says, she's your uncle. So how does the pasuk use this expression? She's your uncle. She's not your uncle. She's only the wife of your uncle. So miklal, from the expression of the pasuk that refers to your uncle's wife as your uncle, I see the isha kabaila, that a wife and a husband is the same thing, and therefore regarding the psul of korva, we say that the wife is the same thing also regarding the stepson. And so some Rishonim say that from here you see that this whole entire concept that we see constantly here, that a relative through marriage is also considered to be a relative to be pasul eidos, is min HaTorah, because it's learning it out from this pasuk. That's what many Rishonim say. But other Rishonim, I believe the Rambam holds that it's not min HaTorah. It's only midrabanan. A relative that's a blood relative is min HaTorah, but a relative through marriage is only midrabanan. Going on to the Mishnah, it said, "Baal imay hu ubenoi v'chasanai." That Baal imay, that when you have, again, what's the case over here? Baal imay, the husband, this is your uncle, your uncle through marriage, the wife of your, the husband of your wife, of your mother, that is, again. Baal imay, the husband of your mother, who ubenoi v'chasanai, so that uncle and his children, his son-in-laws, as well will be pasul to you. So the Gemara asks on this. This is the husband of your mother. So benoi, now if that's when it says here in the Mishnah that a son of the husband of your mother will be pasul, hainu achiv, isn't that your brother? At least a half brother? So Rav Yirmiyah said, no, it's actually a case where it's not a brother at all. The case over here is that the husband of your mother had a son from a different marriage, and you don't share with him not a mother and not a father. So there's no connection at all. But there is then another brother in between, that you have a brother that you share with him the same father, and then the son of your mother's husband is that brother that you have, that you share the same father, is also a half brother to that brother. So you and this son of your uncle, of your mother's husband, are not brothers at all. But there is that brother in between that shares shares the same father with one, and a mother with another. So that brother in between will pasul these two that are not brothers at all, because they have that one in between that shares the same father with one and a mother with another. That's what the Mishnah means here when it says the benoi of Baal imay. Now Rav Chisda disagreed with this. Rav Chisda achsher b'achia ach. Rav Chisda says that if there's a brother of your brother, but it's not your brother, it's your brother's brother, like in this case we just mentioned, so he said that's kosher. Amrulei, so they said to him, Lashmile had Rav Yirmiyah. Did you not hear what Rav Yirmiyah said in Pshat and our Mishnah, what it means when it says the ben of the Baal imay? Amalahu, so he answered, Lashmili, I didn't hear this. Kalaima, meaning to say, Lashvirili, I don't hold of his Pshat. But now he achi, according to him, hainu achiv. So if he doesn't hold of this pshat, that we're talking about a ben of your mother's husband, which is not your brother. So then, what is the Mishnah saying? It is your brother. So then it's a brother. Why does Mishnah have to say this? That the son of your mother's husband. And says the Gemara, it's Taka your brother, but Tana Achav Av. The Mishnah is saying that a brother that you have the same father is possible. V'katani Achav Aim, and it's saying also that a brother that you share the same mother is possible. That's so the Mishnah Taka the ben of the Baal Achav is your brother, Baal Ima is your brother. But the Mishnah wants to say that the paternal brother, maternal brother is both going to be possible. Amar Rav Chisda said here Mechutanim. Are Mechutanim allowed to say this to one another? Avi Chassan v'Avi Kala. The father of the Chassan and the father of the Kala Meidin Zal said. They could say this for one another. And we don't compare them to each other. Elaki achla ledano, like a cover to a barrel. On one hand, the cover to a barrel, they fit to one another. They're very closely related. You have to have the cover to cover the barrel. So as close as their relation is, because their children are married now to each other, but at the same time, on the other hand, they're two separate entities. The cover is one thing and the barrel is another thing. So the Gemara is using this as an example where on one hand they're very close, but on the other hand they're not relatives at all. The Mechutanim can testify for one another. Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana said, "Mei dadam lishtei arusa." Person can say edus for his wife, which is only an arusa after kiddushin, after the first stage of marriage, but he did not fully marry her, no nisuin yet. He can say edus for her. Amar Rav, so not yet a relative. Amar Ravina said, "Lo yamarun ela la'fukimina." That's only if he's saying edus for her, something that's going to be negative for her. To say edus to take money away from her. Avala yulila, but to say edus where she's going to get the money for her benefit, he's not going to be believed, because even before you fully married her, but you're gaining money here by this, that you're going to marry her. But the Gemara says, it's not true. Whether he's saying edus to cause her a loss, take money away from her, or edus to gain that she should get money, either way, you're not going to be believed. You are considered to be a relative to your wife after the first stage of marriage. And he explained why this is. He says to Rabbi Bar Bachana, what were you thinking? Why are you saying that a wife only after the first stage of marriage is not yet a relative? Is it because of what Rabbi Chia Barami said in the name of Ula, and here it talks about regarding a Kayin and his wife, and it says as follows: that if it's only a wife after the first stage of marriage, the Kayin does not become a Einin that he can't do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and also a Kayin that's not allowed to become Tamei, but there's an exception. For a wife, he's allowed to become Tamei. This wife after the first stage of marriage, he's not allowed to become Tamei to her. And v'chein he she does not become an einenes. Einenes is the first day before the kvuresh. She does not become an einenes for him when her husband they're not yet fully married. And v'loy metamaloi, and she's not metamet to him. Now here, when it says loy metamaloi, it's not referring to the isser. There is no isser for a kehenes to become tamei to a husband. It's referring to the mitzvah. A mitzvah of burying a relative. She has that mitzvah does not apply over here that she has to bury her husband because she's not yet his full wife. Now Mesav, she passes away, Eina Yarsha, he does not inherit her. Meis who, however, here after the first stage of marriage, if the husband dies and now the wife is a widow, she does get the payment of a ksuba. If they wrote a ksuba earlier on, if they already wrote the ksuba after the first stage of marriage, she'll get a ksuba. So here we see clearly that the first stage of marriage is not yet considered to be a wife regarding all these halachas. So now Rabbi Bar Bachana was comparing and saying the same things regarding what we're discussing in our sugya, korve, relative. After the first stage of marriage, the wife is not a relative. Says the Gemara, no, but Hassam b'she'erei tal rachmana. There, the pasuk uses the term she'erei. She'erei means she'er basar. When the marriage is fully done, that a relation with one another, it's complete husband and wife. Akati lav she'erei. He said before the nisuim, before the end of the marriage, it's not yet she'erei. That term does not apply. But hacham mishum ikruvi daituhu. Here, the concept of a relative is based on ikruvi daita, that it's your relative and there's a closeness in your das. Even after the first stage of marriage, that concept of korve applies. So the Mefarshim explained, don't mistake to think that the Gemara is saying that the basis of the psul of korve is because of the fact that you're biased, because you're zachshash, you'll lie. That's not what it is. It's just defining what's the measuring stick that we use to say that someone is a relative, the ikruvi daita, and that applies even by a wife. But the psul itself is just korve, which is exeris hakasav that you apostle, the yumsa v'salbanim. The next thing in the Mishnah, it said, Charge levadoi, as a stepson is possible, but it's only the stepson, not the stepson's children, not the stepson's son-in-laws, only the stepson is possible to you. Now, Tana Rabbanan and Abraisa, we learned, Charge levadoi, the stepson himself, he's going to be possible. Rabbi Yosi says, Gisai, by a brother-in-law, it's the same thing. By a brother-in-law, also, it's only your brother-in-law that's going to be puzzle, and not your brother-in-law's children or son-in-laws. Now, B'tanya Yidach, in a different brayse, it says the exact thing, but in the reverse. Gisei levadai, a son-in-law is going to be puzzle, only the son-in-law, not his children. Rabbi Yudah says, again, what did I say, son-in-law? I meant the brother-in-law. Gisei is a brother-in-law. Okay, the Gisei, the brother-in-law, that's your wife's sister's husband, the brother-in-law is going to be puzzle. And Rabbi Yudah says that no, it's the son-in-law, that only the son-in-law is going to be puzzle. Okay, so now what are these two brises here saying? Maika Omar, Chargai is, stepson. Yeah, okay. Chargai is a stepson. Sorry, okay. Now Maika Omar, says the Gemara, what are these two brises here saying? So Rabbi Yosi, when he says Gisai, and Rabbi Yehuda, when he says Chargai, what is he trying to say? If you're going to read these brises as follows, in a way that they're really not arguing at all. Hachika Omar, this is how you read the brisa. Chargai levadai, that the two brises, in the first brisa it says Chargai levadai, that only the stepson, he's possible, but not his children. V'hu adin legisai. And the same thing applies also to a brother-in-law, that only he's possible, not the children. Also, Rabbi Yosi comes to say Gisei levadai, that the brother-in-law, only he is possible, v'hu adin lechargai. And the same thing applies to a stepson, that only the stepson is possible and not the children. So it means that both of them are agreeing over here that by the stepson and by the brother-in-law, they are possible and not anyone else. So if so, Elamas Nisin, but in our Mishnah, that's not what it says. The Ketani in our Mishnah, it says, Gisai, when it comes to a brother-in-law, I say, Hu b'nai v'chasanai. That includes the brother-in-law and his children, and his son-in-laws as well. So Mani, Loi Rabbi Yehuda, V'loi Rabbi Yosi. It's not according to Rabbi Yehuda, not according to Rabbi Yosi. As we said that in both of these brises, we see that they both agree that even by a brother-in-law, the children are not possible. Therefore the Gemara says, this is how you have to read the brayse. Chargai levadai, that first Rabbi Yehuda says that his son-in-law, he himself is possible. Aval gisa, but when it comes to this, it's to the brother-in-law, there he disagrees. There he says, Hu b'nai v'chasanai, like it says in our Mishnah, that gisa, that by the brother-in-law, the son and the son-in-laws are possible as well. Also Rabbi Yosi says, no, it's actually the opposite. By a brother-in-law, we say that it's only he that's possible. When it comes to a stepson, the stepson is going to be possible to you, and also the sons and the sons-in-law. That's the Pshat in our Mishnah. So the machlokes over here is whether we say only the son-in-law is possible himself and not the children, or we say that by a brother-in-law. So the Gemara asks on this, and here we go back to a brayse that was quoted in Amar Aleph. The Tani Rab Chiya said, Shmoina Avis. There are 8 Aves. There are the 8 people that we said in our Mishnah that are relatives that are possible to you. Shehein, Esther, and Varabah. Now, if you add to that their children and the sons and sons-in-law, that is another 8 and another 8, which is 24. So, Kaman, according to whose opinion is this? Like Rabbi Yosi, like Rabbi Yehuda. It doesn't follow not Rabbi Yosi and not Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because if you count all the cases that it says in our Mishnah, if you then include the brother-in-law, the gis, so then that's going to be a 9th case. Or if you include not the brother-in-law, because by the brother-in-law his children are not possible, but you include the stepson, because the children of the stepson are possible, then it's also going to be a 9th. So there is a 9th over here, either the brother-in-law or the stepson. So why is Rabbi Chiya, that is, in the Brais is saying that there's only 8? So therefore, the Gemara says, Hachikama. The way to understand the Brais that we quoted before is as follows. Chargai levadai. So first, Rabbi Yehuda says that the Chargai, the stepson, only the stepson is possible. Avol gisai, but when it comes to a brother-in-law, hu ubenai v'chasanai. By your brother-in-law, it's his children as well. Then what's Rabbi Yosi saying? Rabbi Yosi says gisai levadai, that even by a brother-in-law, his children are still kasher v'kol sheken chargai. And definitely the same thing applies also regarding a stepson. Umasnisin, Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah where it says that by a brother-in-law the children are possible, that follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And the Braisa that says that there's only 8, and we don't include not a son-in-law, again, we don't include not a brother-in-law and not a stepson to be one of those that the children are possible, that's Rabbi Yosi. So therefore there's only 8 because we exclude both, the stepson and the brother-in-law. Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, one more, let's just do one more piece of here till the 2 dots. So the Gemara says that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yosi, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi. So now this Rabbi Yosi that he says, it could be referring to what we just spoke about in the Braisa regarding the brother-in-law, that Rabbi Yossi says the children of your brother-in-law are going to be kosher to you. That's one thing. But there's also a Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, another Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah. And Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah said, Rabbi Yossi zu Mishnah Rabbi Kiva va Mishnah Rishayna. Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah says that Daidai u ben Daidai v'chalarayla Yoshay. Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah says that the amount of relatives that are possible are much less. Your uncle and then his children, which are the first cousins. Which means that Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah holds that our brother-in-law himself is kosher. Okay, so now the question is, when Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, the Allah is like Rabbi Yossi, which Rabbi Yossi was he referring to? Rabbi Yossi that we just learned here in the Braisa, or was he referring back to Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah? So the Gemara brings a story. Ahima Tante, there was a document of a gift to have a chasima letre gisi. Brother-in-laws were signed as witnesses on this. So Rabbi Yossi lachshure. Rabbi Yosef said that brother-in-laws are kosher, they're relatives, but the brother-in-laws are not possible. It could be a good star. Because Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, the Allah is like Rabbi Yossi, and he thought to say, which Rabbi Yossi is this? Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah where it says that only your first cousin is possible, brother-in-laws are kosher to one another. Abaye said, how do you know that Shmuel was saying that Allah is like Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah that says that a brother-in-law is kosher? Maybe it's going on Rabbi Yossi in the Braisa, the apostle Begisai, that says that brother-in-laws are still relatives, they're apostle, but it's only the children of your brother-in-laws that are kosher. Says the Gemara, now you can't say that because the Amma Shmuel himself said, I myself and my brother-in-law Pinchas, the Havin and Achi, they were actually brothers. They weren't only brother-in-laws. They were brothers vigisi, and they were also brother-in-laws because they married wives which are sisters. So they were brothers and brother-in-laws. Therefore, they're possible because they're also brothers. So what do we understand from this? Avol gisi da'alma. If they would just be brother-in-laws and not brothers, shaper dami, they would not be possible. So I see that Shmuel holds that brother-in-laws are not possible. But the Gemara says that's not how we understand what Shmuel was saying, what he was trying to say. Vidilma, maybe what Shmuel was trying to say, Kagayin ana o Pinchas mishum de gisei kama. He was trying to describe what means a brother-in-law. A brother-in-law means when you married your wife's sister. Again, when your brother-in-law marries your wife's sister, that's a brother-in-law. Not your wife's brothers. That's not the brother-in-law. The one that married your wife's sister. He was just trying to describe a brother-in-law, but he wasn't coming to say that if not for the fact that he was a brother, that he wouldn't be possible. Maybe Shmuel still holds that a brother-in-law is possible. So this star here that has brother-in-law signed on it is possible. That's what Abaye argued with Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef accepted this argument of Abaye, and he said, if so the star is going to be possible. So Zil Kanye Beide Mesire Kerabalaza. So now this star with the signatures on it, the star is possible because it has brother-in-law signing it. Now instead though, you can use other Edom, not signed in the star, Edom that are there when you hand over the star from the gift, from the giver to the recipient. And according to Rabbi Lazar says, who's the Edom of the star? Not the ones that sign in the star, but the ones that are there when you hand over the star. But the Gemara asks on that, how could you use Edom Mesir in such a case? Rabbi said, that you don't need Edom in the star. You could have Edom just that are there when you hand over the star, but that's as long as you don't have Pasala Edom signed in the star. If you have Pasala Edom signed in the star, then the Rabbanan Pasal the star, even according to Rabbi Lazar. So Rav Yosef said, Zil, I'm sorry, you have to go. They're not allowing me. I can't figure out a way how to be machshir the star, that you can use it, that you should be able to get the gift with the star. And so as you see, the conclusion of the Gemara is that brother-in-laws are possible.